Welcome into One of One Sports, the only one for your original sports commentary and analysis. Bit of a change up here. First Monday episode is we are officially starting a breakup and a change in the schedule. Now, Monday, I'll unveil my new top 25 in my new rankings. Tuesday, as usual, tomorrow I will give predictions for the week, break down all the biggest games as we've been doing. So, same type of content, just 2 different days. Now, with that being said, let's get into it. All right, before we start unveiling the new teams, I have to ask you guys if you are enjoying the college football content on the channel, whether that be the predictions, the rankings, or the recaps or reactions, or if you're just a sports fan. We're going to have college basketball content, NBA content just around the corner. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to help me grow the channel. Any support is much appreciated, and without further ado, let's get started. All right, so first up, who dropped out? We had 4 teams drop out from last week's ranking. Florida State was in the 25 spot. They lost their 3rd straight game to Pittsburgh. They're out of the rankings. Iowa State lost a 2nd straight week, this time to Colorado. They drop out. Michigan was handled by USC. They drop out. And then the last team to drop out was the Arizona State Sun Devils, who without quarterback Sam Leavitt were absolutely crushed by the Utah Utes. So those 4 teams are out, and one honorable mention that didn't make it, the Memphis Tigers, undefeated and one of the best teams in the group of 5. They were my first team out. Now let's look at 25 through 21, where we have 2 new teams at 25 and 24. Washington back in the rankings. They had fell out after they lost to Ohio State, but now back-to-back weeks, you had a good win over Maryland, where the offense sparked late, had a really good comeback, and then last week Damon Williams had maybe the best game anyone has had all season at the quarterback position. Over 500 yards total offense, 4 touchdowns, absolutely electric. We'll look to see if they carry that over to the Michigan game this week in Ann Arbor. Texas back in the rankings. They fell out last week. They get back in because Oklahoma is a very strong win. Arch Manning played the 2nd best game he's played all season. Not as good as the Sam Houston one, but that was Sam Houston. You didn't have any turnovers, and the defense proved it is a really legit defense. There were some concerns after the Florida game, as DJ Lagway and those receivers kind of picked apart the Texas secondary at times and ran the ball pretty well. But no, the Texas defense proved they are very strong. Virginia drops a little, and that's just because at the time when they beat Florida State, I thought that was like a top 10 victory. It's become pretty clear Florida State is nowhere near a top 10 caliber team. So the win just doesn't hold the value it once did. So that's why they have fallen down. South Florida 22 got a really fun, really good win over North Texas, who was one of the other group of 5 teams in the American who was undefeated and competing for, a playoff spot in that conference. But after a really tight back and forth first half where they had some turnover problems, they scored 28 points in the first 7 minutes of the second half, which was quite impressive, I will say. One of the strangest games I've seen in a long time. They're at 22, and then Cincinnati at 21, Nebraska at 20. And I gotta say, I just don't understand the talk about ranking Cincinnati above Nebraska, because people are saying, and I'll talk about the AP poll ranked Cincinnati 1 spot above Nebraska. And if you watch Josh Pate's college football show, he did something very similar. And he said, well, you look at, that was week 1, and now later into the season, we evaluate the resumes, and now Cincinnati's above Nebraska, which is an argument, sure. But if Cincinnati's resume was clear of Nebraska, they wouldn't be 1 spot apart. To say these teams are so close that they're right next to each other, but they're also far enough apart where the head-to-head win for Nebraska doesn't matter, is just completely nonsense. It doesn't make any sense from a logical standpoint. Either Nebraska is clearly below Cincinnati and there should be a gap, or Cincinnati and Nebraska are really close and head-to-head should be a difference. I personally value head-to-head. They have the same record. Nebraska's loss to Michigan is not a bad loss that's holding them back. So yes, I will go Nebraska over Cincinnati at every time, right at this point. Maybe Nebraska loses soon, Cincinnati emerges, but yeah. Moving on to 19, I have the Utah Utes, who had fallen out after being ranked really high early in the season, but they've started to get some good wins. The ASU win quite strong, and they have a big one coming up against my number 17 team, BYU. So we have a top 20 matchup according to my poll. I don't know where the AP had, I think Utah was in the 20s in the AP, but BYU got a win against Arizona that I didn't think they were going to get. And I gotta be honest, watching that game, Arizona should have won that game. I'm so mad I got that prediction wrong. I don't really believe in this BYU team, but at this point, 6-0 with some quality wins, or at least semi-quality wins against teams like Arizona, Colorado, at least decent wins. So I give them some respect. Winning is the object of the game. Similar thing with my 18 team here, Georgia Tech, who, like BYU, doesn't have the strongest of wins, because Clemson, not a strong win. Colorado, if it's not a strong win for BYU, it's not a strong win for Georgia Tech, right? And Georgia Tech they didn't sort of lose to Wake Forest. They beat Wake Forest, but just the ACC coming out and saying they blew the call that directly cost Wake Forest the game. If the refs get that call right, then Wake Forest kneels the game out, and it's over, right? And Georgia Tech's not undefeated, and no one's ranking them. So that's why I struggle with this Georgia Tech team. They go on the road to Duke this week. That's a chance for a really quality win, and that's a really key game in terms of who can make the ACC title game. And then 16 is Missouri, who I didn't drop too far for losing to Alabama because it was a very competitive game. I think Alabama is a really good team. You'll see them later on in the rankings. It's just, I'm not going to punish you too much for that game. They're still 16. 15 through 11. At 15, I have LSU a bit lower than the consensus here, and that's because I just still don't see enough from the offense. I know it was better against South Carolina, but if Nussmeier is not going to get fully healthy, which at this point I don't know how he can when he's playing injured every week and taking hits behind the offensive line, that is questionable. The receiving core is not even fully healthy right now. I will say the run game took steps against South Carolina. It's the best their run game has looked all season. They're going to need that to hold up, and they're going to need to play better offensively as soon as this next week. But really, these next 2 weeks, you're going to have Vanderbilt. You're going to have Texas A&M. So LSU's got to step it up. Right now, I can't be as high on them as general consensus because, yes, the defense has been amazing pretty much all season long. The offense is just not good enough in my book, and it's a similar story for Oklahoma. These teams were right next to each other. I just think Oklahoma is the slightly better wins in the Michigan and Auburn victory, though you could argue they have the worst loss to Texas versus Ole Miss. That's why these teams right there, but it's pretty much the same story. The defense has been amazing. The offense has not, and that hadn't come back to haunt them until this last week when the offense was truly awful with 3 turnovers. Before that, they struggled during the Michigan game, but Mateer made enough plays. They struggled during the Auburn game, but he had the game-winning drive. This time, Mateer played very poorly. The whole offense played poorly, and we saw the downsides of this Oklahoma team. Because we've seen the highs when Mateer is playing like one of the best quarterbacks in football and you have one of the best defenses in college football, you can look like a top 10 team. But if Mateer doesn't have it on, there's not enough offense supporting him, there's no run game, and you can look like a very bad team. And that's what happened in the Red River Shootout. Continuing with this string of SEC teams, we have the Vanderbilt Commodores, who were on bye this week, so there's not much to say. They stay about where they were last week. Didn't punish them much for the Alabama loss, and they still have a really good resume. They're 13. Like I said, that's another marquee matchup according to my rankings, as we have 13 versus 15 within my poll, and Vanderbilt versus LSU. 12, I have USC, who I was really impressed by in that Michigan win. I do think Michigan helped them out a lot by deploying a strategy which was not very bright in terms of just coming out throwing the ball against USC instead of trying to lean on the run game. That was never going to work for Michigan, yet they went with it. So I do think game plan wise, they were bailed out a little bit, but still the defense was a lot better, and the offense absolutely torched Michigan's defense. They looked like Michigan had no resistance whatsoever, and that's a Michigan defense that maybe it's not elite, but I thought I knew it was pretty good, and USC just torched them like they torched everybody. They have an argument they are the best offense in college football. Makai Lemon has an argument he's the best receiver in college football, and Jaden Maeva has played like a top 10 quarterback in college football. So as the defense comes along, we know how good the offense is. Didn't rank them last week. They're new to the poll, but I was super impressed. And the Illinois loss, not a bad loss. Sure, they're not, they've proven they're not elite like the likes of the teams that have beaten Illinois, who will come later in the poll, but still very strong offense, vulnerable defense. And that's the same story with Tennessee at 11. Elite offense, Joey Aguilar and that crew are still putting up points. The receiver core has looked really good, but the passing defense is just really, really poor and has been torched time and time again. If I'm a Tennessee fan, that's very concerning with who's coming up on the schedule. But as it stands right now, you have one 3-point loss, which you easily could have won to Georgia, who, if we unveil 6 through 10, comes in at number 9. So you don't have a bad loss at all. And it's just like USC, strong offense, vulnerable defense, and that whole row is just outside of Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's actually kind of complete, but it's just the polarization of Tennessee and USC's weak defense versus Oklahoma and LSU's weak offense, and then Vanderbilt being the, like, you know, not elite on either side, but really good on both. At 10, I have Notre Dame, where I feel like a lot of people are going to disagree with this, and I just don't fully understand why. Because people act like Notre Dame starting 0-2 meant they just weren't good. They lost to Miami, who's yet to be revealed, and A&M, who's yet to be revealed. So you can assume those teams are in my top 5 at some place by a total of 4 points. You went on the road to Miami, who might be the best team in the country, and lost by 3. That's nothing to be knocked down a poll for. And A&M, you lost, yes, you were at home and off a bye, so it's, you know, it hurts a little bit. But it was a missed extra point, or not even missed, a botched extra point that cost you the game. Otherwise, you're going to overtime. You might have that win, right? So those losses to 2 of the best teams in the country, and you proved you were right there alongside them in terms of that level. So I don't get why people act like they were just bad at the start of the year. The defense had its struggles, but now the past 3 weeks, you've held NC State, who had scored at least 24 in every game and over 30 in a majority, to 7 points. You held Boise State to 7 points, and you held Arkansas, who we've seen put up in the 30s against teams like Memphis, against teams like Ole Miss, and against Tennessee, and have been competitive in all those games, losing by 1 to Memphis, 3 to Tennessee, and 6 to Ole Miss. You beat them 56-13 and caused them to get their coach fired. So I think Notre Dame has clearly proven they are a really strong team. The defense is getting better. I think they're better than the 10th best team in the country. It's just, I do understand they have 2 losses. I just don't understand why some people act like you can't rank Notre Dame as high because of those 2 losses when everyone admits they're the 2 of the very best teams in the sport. We already talked about Georgia at 9. Wasn't impressed with the Auburn game. I think if the refs make a different call on the goal line, there's a good chance you lose the game. But they didn't, and you responded in the second half in dominant fashion, so you got to give them credit there. But this Georgia defense is just not what Kirby Smart has had in the past. There's no pass rush, and the secondary is gettable, and the offense is not really explosive. At least it has been outside of the Tennessee game. And you can see we got a lot of marquee matchups. Just want to point out, I have 10 versus 12 now to add. So we had 17 versus 19 in Utah BYU, 15 versus 13 in Vanderbilt LSU, 12 versus 10 in USC Notre Dame, and 6 versus 9 in Georgia Ole Miss. So that's a stacked lineup of games, in my opinion. But yeah, Georgia versus Ole Miss. Ole Miss's defense hasn't looked elite, and we'll break that down later. I just think Georgia's offense is going to have to step it up moving forward, and it's what's keeping them. Actually, both sides of the ball are keeping Georgia from being higher, because though you're very competitive against a team like Alabama, just eye test wise, Alabama looks to be like ramping up. Georgia, I'm not sure they are. They look kind of stagnated. Oregon comes in at 8. You lost in your own building pretty thoroughly. Not like you got absolutely crushed, but it was clear Indiana was better than you. And the Penn State win, I still give it a lot of weight, but I understand if some people don't. I think Oregon's likely to cause a Penn State spiral. So I think winning that game in the whiteout environment against that talented of a team, I still think that's an extremely impressive victory for Oregon. But outside of that, it's a bunch of dominant wins against bad teams, and you lost to Indiana at home. So yeah, that's going to hurt you out. So you're the second highest one-loss team behind Alabama, who's now just racking on top 25 wins. You've beaten Georgia on the road, which is my number 9 team. You've beaten Vanderbilt at 13 at home, who I've ranked, and you beat Missouri 16 on the road in 3 consecutive weeks. And you got another opportunity against Tennessee in this 7 versus 11 game. I don't think I even mentioned that earlier. It's just a crazy weekend coming up of college football. And yeah, I get the Florida State loss doesn't look great, but at some point when you pile on this many good wins, it starts to override what happened in week 1. Still behind Ole Miss, though, who was not impressive against Washington State, but you still won the game, and you are still undefeated, something Alabama is not, so that's why I give them the 6th spot. Finally, we unveil the top 5. We're at 5 and 4, back and forth. All season, I've been going back between A&M and Texas Tech, because Texas Tech's blowout win of Utah versus A&M's close win against Notre Dame on the road are both really strong wins. And Texas Tech, eye test wise, I think's looked a little bit better, but A&M, eye test wise, at times has looked great too. You could go either way to me, but they are clearly 4 and 5. And then number 3, number 2, number 1, Miami, Ohio State, Indiana. And there was a time, like when I made my rough draft, I had Indiana at 3, then I moved them up to 2, and then I was like, why am I really not ranking Indiana number 1, right? Because Ohio State and Indiana both played Illinois. Indiana was more impressive in that game. I talked all year about how Oregon is my national championship pick, how Dante Moore I think is the best quarterback in the country. Last week I said double down on all of it. He'll win the Heisman. Oregon will win the national title. I think they're the best team in the sport. And Indiana went into their building and handled them. So I think they have the best win in all of college football. And then the Illinois win is just as good as any of Ohio State's wins. And Indiana has, after that, a decent non-cons win against Old Dominion, which I know people overlook, but Old Dominion's been a good team. So Indiana has the resume, and they're undefeated. And they've been, eye test-wise, they've been just as good as Ohio State and Miami. So I do think they have earned that one spot. And then Miami, Ohio State, you could go either way. Look, Miami, eye test wise to me, at times has looked a little bit better when they've peaked, but Ohio State has been more consistent, if that makes sense. So I value the consistency a little bit more because when Miami has faltered, it looks a little worse than Ohio State, which really hasn't faltered at all to this point. But I do think those are clearly 1, 2, and 3. If you wanted to mix up the order, I would hear you out. So that is officially the 1 of 1 top 25 for college football. What is this, week 7, week 8? We're getting there. We're headed towards the back stretch of the season. Soon college football playoff committee rankings will be coming out and we'll get to compare to those instead of the AP poll. But I thank you guys all for watching. Like I said, if you guys enjoy the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to help me support the channel. And I'll be back tomorrow with this week's predictions videos, which we've already laid out, according to this, 5 top 25 matchups. So it should be a great one. Until next time.